Hello, BookTube. I had appointments bitterly early this morning. I, I left my little bean so early that she was just staring at me in groggy disbelief. It was an hour after our walk, but it was still far earlier than I ever move. And uh, when those appointments were over, it was just about time for the Brattle Bookshop to open up for business for the day. And I felt like I owed myself a little treat. So I went. I went to the Brattle, even though I just went yesterday. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, the Brattle is a used bookstore in downtown Boston, and they are great. 3 stories of books crammed into every nook and cranny and very reasonably priced. Even the third floor. The third floor is antique and collectible, first edition, rare books, stuff like that. And even there, you'll get a good price. No one's trying to gouge you. And in addition to that, the Brattle has turnover like you wouldn't believe. They're constantly bringing boxes and boxes of bought material up from the basement to be priced and distributed, either inside those 3 stories or outside. The Brattle also has an outdoor sale lot with thousands of books for $1, $3, and $5. And this morning it was cold, not even chilly, just plain cold. And it was first thing, I had the carts entirely to myself. I had that whole lot entirely to myself. I was alone out there, just entirely to myself. And I needed it. So I indulged myself. And because of the Brattle's high turnover rate, you will find stuff every day that wasn't there the day before. But also, as I've mentioned a couple of times on this channel, there's a thing that happens when you're looking at thousands and thousands and thousands of books. If you were out in the sale lot, the books aren't organized in any way. It's not like you can write off one section because it's a subject you're not interested in. They're not organized in any way except by price. So you have to go through each one of them if you really want to know what's out there. And I have found that even an avid book person will just miss books. They'll just plain miss things that haven't moved from the day before, but nevertheless, you didn't see them the previous day. It's not like you saw them and decided against them. You just didn't see them. So I went back to the Brattle and sort of counted on that, and I found a bunch of stuff. I found a pile of books. Some of them, I'm sure, are keepers. I'm not so much sure about this first one. I'm a little bit iffy about this author, but I've never read this book. This is a Bantam paperback of Felipe Fernandez Armesto, and here he's co-writing with Derek Wilson, a book about the Reformation, which is a favorite subject of mine. It is the stomping ground of a favorite author of mine. And I've never read this book. I'm always up to read, just a general narrative history of the Protestant Reformation. Absolutely. And I'm hoping this also is the Northern Reformation so that I can just get everything all at once. I mean, it's a Bantam trade paperback. It's Felipe Fernando Armesto. I read his book Millennium. I've read it a couple of times, and I'm not sure that I can absolve it of being dumb, which is kind of weird for somebody with his credentials. It's kind of weird, and I don't know if I'm going to have that reaction with this. I know the Reformation really well, so maybe that was a mistake to get. But I'm too curious, and these were all incredibly cheap, so it was worth a risk. And then this next one is one that I've had many times before. I always manage to get it away. I always manage to get rid of it. I'm going to try and hold on to this one. It's a great anthology. It's the Norton Book of Nature Writing. This thing here, the Norton Book of whatever it is, they have a slightly tiny different form factor. They're not quite as wide as a normal hardcover. So they fit really well in the hand. This one is edited by John Elder and Robert Finch. Robert Finch has many books in this room. I can't grab one right here from where I am, but he's a bard of Cape Cod, which is an area of the world I know really well. And I know a lot of the authors in here. I've had this many times. I think for the money, it's probably my favorite nature writing anthology. There is one that's, believe it or not, much bigger than this, called Encompassing Nature, that is really good, but I've had it a couple of times. I would certainly get it again if I saw a $2 copy at the Brattle. But the times that I've read Encompassing Nature, I've thought, this is not a big book. This is an inconveniently big book. This is huge. And if you're going to make a book like that, you kind of sort of have to justify it. And my memory of Encompassing Nature is that the table of contents doesn't really do that. That it's sort of a everything in the kitchen sink approach. Whereas this is far more discerning. There are going to be bits and pieces that I'm going to reread in this today, for sure. Let's see here. Let's try the ergonomics here. Oh, yes, okay. The next 3, hit a bit of a theme. Let's see if you can spot the theme. The first one is by James Clifford, and it is young Sam Johnson. Again, with one of these library plastic coverings over it. And this is about the great Samuel Johnson, only as a young man. We tend to think of him as the enormous, hulking, and experienced figure that we encounter in Boswell's life. But he wasn't always that way. He obviously, he wasn't always that way. He was a young man on the make. He was his own much better, more intelligent, and more ethical version of Boswell long before he met Boswell. And I've had this book before. I already know that I like it. The minute I saw it, I realized I don't have a copy, much less a perfect copy. This thing is in perfect condition. The author was born in Evansville, Indiana. He attended Wabash College. He got his first degree from MIT, right across the river in Cambridge. Then he was the manager of a textile operation in the Midwest. And then he came back and got his degree at Columbia. So he fell in love late with literary studies. And it kind of shows endearingly in the book. Then we have this old thing. This is going to need to be saved. The dust jacket is going to need to be reinforced, but I don't plan on getting rid of it. This is by Joseph Wood Crutch, who was forever and ever a jobbing book critic. He worked as a book critic for his whole life. I think at The Nation, he was he was the drama critic at The Nation for a quarter of a century, and wrote lots of other stuff as well. And he wrote a biography of Edgar Allan Poe, I think, that I really liked. And this is his biography of Samuel Johnson. You might be sensing the little theme that's going on here. There's Johnson in the coffee house. It's a little bit of a dorky cover design, but they were like that at the time. And I think I read Crutch's biography of Johnson when I read his Poe book and thought it was quite good. And I think that's what caused me to go to the library and get his Johnson biography. Of course, no library will have this now. And I'm hoping that the person who got rid of this maybe has other Crutch books. Because that would be great. I would absolutely love to read some of his other stuff, even though late in his life some of his other stuff gets a little bit dippy for me. And the one book of his that I would most like to read, I don't think exists. I don't think that anyone's ever made a 1,000-page annotated collection of his theater criticism, which is kind of a shame. To put it mildly, that's kind of a shame. And then the third book here is by John Wayne, but not that John Wayne, but another John Wayne. This is his biography of Samuel Johnson. So the theme is now in full display here. These are a little bit ratty, and this one had a bookmark with a tassel in it. Talk about an extra perk. They're my favorite things in the world. This one had one in it already. I will fix up these more beaten up books just because I plan on keeping them. I have lots of other stuff on Samuel Johnson. I have Paul Fussell's book on Johnson as a writer. I have the book Dictionary Johnson, which is just about Johnson during the time of him compiling his great dictionary of the English language. I have Bates' book, his huge biography on Johnson that is the place to start, the place to finish. And on top of all that, these things struck me because I have this as well. This was my very first book in 2021. This great thing from Yale. The Selected Works, this huge volume here that I have gone back to many times in the course of just this year. It was one of the first books that I got in 2021, and now we're at the end of 2021. And all of a sudden I'm finding this vein of Johnsoniana. I loved this volume, absolutely loved it. I've been going back to it over and over again. And it was the first book. I get all of these books in the mail, and I hold them for review, or I send them out to other people to review, and I stage them at one place or another out in the other room. Only once in a blue moon do I take a new book, a brand new book, and bring it into this room, into the little book room where all books in the world hope to go someday. This is their nirvana. It almost never happens that in the same year I will bring a new book in here. I have to be dead sure, and I was dead sure of this. This is actually in this room. I took it out of this room because I've been examining all the books of 2021. So I have quite a bit on Johnson. I also have the Viking Portable, Johnson and Boswell, and a couple of different editions of Boswell's Life of Johnson. And the Oxford World Classics, I think it's up on one of those shelves there, the Oxford World Classic edition of Johnson's Lives of the Poet. Lives of the Poets is incredible. It's just an amazing work. Johnson's just incredible, just in general. But I couldn't resist 3 Johnson biographies, so I just grabbed them all. Then the next 2 are my own profession, book reviews. No matter what kind of airs and graces they put on, they're jobbing book reviews where you've got an editor who sends you something and he wants 800 words, 1,000 words, 2,000 words, 3,000 words, and he wants it by such and such a time, and he'll pay you such and such, and it's highway robbery, and you'll have to twist his arm to remember to pay you and whatnot. That you can put on airs all you want, but that is the job that generated these books. The first one is by Louis Menand, the author of Metaphysical Club, that a lot of you will know, and this is American Studies, his book on American authors. So Richard Wright, The New Yorker, Norman Mailer, Pauline Kael. It looks like lots of other things are in here too. Al Gore, Laurie Anderson. Oh, Jerry Falwell. Fantastic find by me. I like this author. And I've had this book before, but only in a trade paperback. I was glad to find it in a hardcover. And then there's this big thing here. This is my erstwhile colleague, Michael Durda. This is Bound to Please. And as you can, an extraordinary 1-volume literary education. Yeah, okay. These were pieces that Bob Silvers or somebody commissioned from you to write. This was, in other words, the point I'm trying to make, and it's only friendly. It's a jibe. But people, when they pull their book reviews together, they always feel, even reviewers, often feel that reviews are some sort of poor cousin of a genre. So you really can't just bring them together and expect that anybody will want that. Instead, you have to make them into something. You have to pretend that you were writing towards a goal or with a theme all along. You weren't. You absolutely weren't. But you have to pretend that to make it into a book on its own. And it's amazing to me how many critics have felt insecure enough to try to do that. It underscores the point that I always make when I talk about reviewing. I always want to remind people that book reviewing is a kind of writing. It's not just a response to a kind of writing, it's a kind of writing on its own. And Michael Durda is terrific at it. Why shouldn't he just write these books or collect these, instead of trying to call it, an extraordinary 1-volume literary education? But this is a collection of pieces on all kinds of, what is the dedication here? For my colleagues past and present of the Washington Post book world. The Washington Post book criticism used to be detachable, like the New York Review of Books. Not the New York Times Book Review. But funding, it hurts all but the biggest papers. So what do we have here? We have, lots and lots of reviews. We have Robin Waterfield's translation of Herodotus, Ted Hughes' Tales from Ovid, a review of The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, a review of John Hale's big book on the Renaissance, a review of David Daniels' biography of William Tyndale. I'll have to see what that's like. I don't remember that review, but I love that book. A review of Anthony Burgess's great novel, The Dead Man in Deptford, about Christopher Marlowe. Claire Tomlin's book on Samuel Pepys. Boswell's Presumptuous Task. Oh, his review of Mason and Dixon is in here. Oh, fantastic. All right, well, this is much like the Nature Anthology. This is prime for rereading, just prime for it. Then this next one is old and a little bit of ratty condition, but boy, oh boy, am I hoping that whoever unloaded this on the Brattle unloads more. This is Abbeys. It's a guidebook to English abbeys. And it's written by M.R. James, who was a great medievalist, a great scholar, a great occasional writer, a serious thinker, but who in one of those ironic twists of fate that only literature can really do, is known for his ghost stories. He wrote tremendously effective ghost stories that you can see. If you go to a used bookstore, you'll find them in a million different editions. It's almost impossible to avoid, even after all this time, the ghost stories of M.R. James. But he wrote guidebooks to abbeys. He did cathedrals, I think. I think he also did one for castles. I'm not sure if he did one for English country houses, but I would love them all because the makers of these books spared no expense to just have them be beautiful. If I remember, there's also plans. Yes, there is. There are plans in here as well. that fold out from the page. These are elaborate things. Amazing that I would get this for $1. Just amazing to me. Especially since I've been to all of these abbeys. So that is just, oh, look at this. I'm afraid to do it on camera because I'm worried that I'll destroy it. There is an actual detachable map still in the pocket in the back. Dare we see what it is? I'm no Jason Harrigan here. I'm not good at handling these sorts of things. Dare we see what this is? What is this? Oh, it's the Great Western Railway and the abbeys that it encounters. Oh my, look at that. So I guess in time, this would have been when did this come out? 1926. So in time, back then, I should probably ask Jason. Back then, maybe this would have been used as an actual map. Maybe the reader would have been expected to consult this. Oh God, how am I going to get back in here? See, this is exactly why I don't have delicate stuff in my collection, because I'm terrible with it. I'm amazed that this is going back in without ripping. I'm just going to leave it there. I will study the... M.R. James will be great to read on these things anyway, because even though he was a trained scholar, he never lost sight of how to write engagingly. It wasn't just the ghost stories. And then finally, the last thing is this thing. It's from the 1970s, I believe. Let me check the date here. 1981. And it was a series called Museums Rediscovered. Picture books. Going from museum to museum, giving you full color renditions of the artwork, full page descriptions of some of the signature pieces, and the introduction gives you a little bit of an overview. And this is about Boston's own Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. And I'm always up for a Gardner Museum pictorial. I love the Gardner Museum, but I don't go there anymore. And I have no idea if I'll ever be there again. It's an amazing thing to experience. If you come to Boston, you really should make the time to go to the Gardner Museum. I always like to say, if you come to Boston, go to the Gardner, go to the Brattle, and wind up here at Hyde Cottage for wine and calzones. That's a perfect Boston trip. But the one thing that I didn't really anticipate here was the gut punch when you get to the paintings, because inevitably you're going to come to this Storm on the Sea of Galilee by Rembrandt, in which the light of day is disappearing. This is from the incident in the Gospels. The light of day is disappearing and a storm is brewing up out of nowhere. Notice there's a line between the light side of the canvas and the dark side of the canvas, and right in the middle of that line is our artist himself. Right in the dividing line between that. And it's a great, great painting that no one will ever see with their eyes again, because it and a bunch of other stuff was stolen from the Gardner in one of the most famous art heists in history in 1990. The thieves cut Storm on a Sea of Galilee out of its frame, rolled it up, and walked it out of the building at night. And just to add insult to injury, it was almost certainly raining when they walked it out of the building. So there's, in my opinion, virtually no chance that even the remains of that will show up again, ever. I myself believe that long before it could get to its destination, and I believe that its first destination was on the west coast of Ireland, I believe that long before it could even get there, it was destroyed. And somewhere, someone had to pay the price for that. I put up a lot of money to get this taken from that museum, and you bring me this. So you need to go head first into a landfill somewhere outside of Milan. We'll never know the whole story. I'm sure that we will never know the whole story. I'm sure that the people who do know the whole story are dead. But at one point along one of the many, many investigations into the Gardner art heist, one note struck me. One intermediary bagman who is in jail right now, and most of his details have been discounted. We know that he was mostly just lying to try and get attention, or to maybe wangle a softer deal in prison or whatever. So we can discount a lot of what he says, but there was one detail when he was talking to Boston investigators that has always stuck with me. Because he claimed to be present at one point during one intermediary handoff, and he said that what he saw was a transparent baggie full of what he described as looking like paint flecks, like Rice Krispies, black and white Rice Krispies. Now, I believe that he did see something like that because he doesn't have any idea what he's talking about. He's just a South Boston mook. So he wouldn't know that that's what it would look like. He wouldn't have any idea. That strikes me as a visually true memory. Which I don't believe. If you take that as true, the optimistic people looking at the Gardner heist will say, well, that was the varnish. The varnish might crack off the painting. I think it was the painting. I don't think and no one's ever going to lay their eyes on Storm on the Sea of Galilee again. Now, fortunately, there are many, many, many high-quality reproductions. You can see the artwork. It's not like some other art heists in history where, before photography, the thing is just gone, and we can only estimate what it looked like. There are plenty in this book and many other books. There are many, many pictures. But the experience that I had so many times of going to the Gardner and staring at the peace and serenity of the courtyard, and then slowly making your way up the museum all the way to the top and finally getting to Storm on the Sea of Galilee, getting to the Rembrandts. The experience that I had on many a snowy afternoon with hardly anybody in the museum, really, not the crowds that you get at the Mona Lisa, where you get up to that floor, those heavy wooden beams, you stare at those paintings, you can walk right up to them and just stare at them. And there is something in that experience that is not communicable by looking at a photo. And that thing, that quality that I've experienced many times with that exact painting, isn't something that anyone coming to the museum after 1990 can experience. So that is a little bit of a gut punch to look at through this book at the pieces of artwork that were stolen that night by men who waited outside until the museum was closed and then bluffed their way in, overpowered the paltry security, and had the run of the place. Just had the run of the place. No internal monitoring, no check stations, no nothing like that. Paleolithic security. So they had the run of the place. They could just walk around the whole of the building empty and just decide what they were going to do, what they were going to take, how they were going to take it. I myself believe that the only thing that could possibly explain the things they took, and especially the things they didn't take, is if they went in with a shopping list. And if they went in with a shopping list, it certainly didn't come from them. They were certainly cat's paws. I don't think anybody doubts that anyway. But that's going to be a little bit melancholy to look at this thing, but I'm still going to love it. I'm just going to love this. I will reinforce it, and it will be one of my Gardner books. So there you go. That was my trip to the Brattle this time around, day 2. We have Museums Rediscovered, the Isabel Stewart Gardner Museum. We have Abbeys by M.R. James, and I'm really hoping that this yields the other M.R. James archaeology or architecture books, because if they're all this beautiful, these volumes are beautiful, then I want them all. Then Bound to Please by the Washington Post's Michael Durda on just various classics, one kind or another. American Studies by Louis Minan, likewise, just occasional work. We have John Wayne's biography of Samuel Johnson. We have Joseph Wood Crutch's biography of Samuel Johnson. And we have James Clifford's biography of Samuel Johnson. Then we have, these are almost out of reach, the Norton Book of Nature Writing. And finally, Felipe Fernandez Armesto's Reformation. Just a paperback about the Reformation. We'll see if it's any good. I've read plenty, but I'm always up for reading more. So that was my trip to the Brattle this morning. Nice and cold, but very enjoyable. I don't know that I'll be back to the Brattle this week. I'm not 100% sure of that. A part of me is hoping that I'm not, because I could stand to just lay on the couch in the sun one of these mornings instead of being gone first thing in the morning away from my little bean. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now. That was another Brattle treat for you, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.